Hello and welcome to Continental Prime here on News Centre Television, coming to you live from Nigeria's economic capital, Lagos. The headlines for this hour. The trial of South Africa's former president adjourned to April 22. Sudan's top general vows formation of constitutional court after coup, says military seized power to prevent civil war. Ethiopia launches another airstrike in Tigray region, hits a rebel training facility. Details shortly. For viewers across Africa and the rest of the world, this is Continental Prime. I'm Sulaiman Alede. It's back to the drawing board for former South African President Jacob Zuma. The High Court in Pietermaritzburg dismissed his application to have prosecutor Billy Downer removed from his case. Judge Pete Cohen ruled that Downer could continue with the prosecution against Zuma. The former president had argued that Downer had a long-standing bias against him. He also accused the prosecutor of leaking his medical records. But Judge Pete Cohen said the prosecutor does not necessarily have to be impartial to ensure a fair trial. Now, joining me now live from Pietermaritzburg is South African journalist and editor Diane Hawker. Good to see you, Diane. Now, Mr. Zuma was initially not expected to appear in court, but he made a surprise appearance. What was his condition like?
Yes, absolutely, Suleiman. All the journalists who were attending the court proceedings were actually surprised when we got a notice at around 8:30 that the former president would actually be appearing in court. And then there was a sudden flurry of activity trying to see where he would be coming in. He came with a large contingent of bodyguards, probably more than 10 bodyguards who surrounded him. And he looked like he was in relatively good spirits, although he was walking quite slowly. He entered the court building, greeting some people who were standing in the corridors, also surprised to see him in court. And I suppose that he attended today, according to his spokesperson, because he felt that he was in a healthy enough state to come to court. Of course, it was also an important ruling for his case. So most likely he would have wanted to see that firsthand.
Was he able to give his reasons why he wanted Judge Pete Cohen removed from that case?
Well, the reasons that he didn't want the judge removed from the case, he was asking for the prosecutor
the
to
prosecutor.
be removed. Yes. The arguments were dealt with a few months ago, a few weeks ago, and today's proceedings were essentially just the judgment on those arguments. What we previously heard is from the legal team, the Zuma legal team, is that they felt that the prosecutor had taken a stance against the former president, which they felt was a bias towards him, that he was sort of gunning for him and trying to ensure that he went to jail at all costs. And they also accused him of some unethical practices, such as leaking the documents, as well as claiming that he was in cahoots with other political players in the country, saying that it was a political prosecution. However, Judge Pitkun looked at that information, as well as the state's argument and other legal precedents that were set prior. And he actually found that when it comes to the question of a fair trial, there are other factors that come into play, as well as, the role of the judge, ensuring that there's balance in the proceedings. And he said he found that it was important for the court as a whole to actually ensure that the proceedings are fair, not necessarily for the prosecutor to be impartial.
So have you been able to gauge the mood of the National Prosecuting Authority following the outcome?
Yes, absolutely. The spokesperson for the National Prosecuting Authority was present at court, and he actually indicated that the NPA was very happy with this outcome. He said that it was paving the way for them to actually continue with this trial. We know that the Zuma case has continued now for much longer than a decade. And in fact, there's another co-accused, which is the company Thales, who has been waiting in the wings for its day in court while all of these proceedings kind of go on a stop-start basis. So the prosecution as well as Thales are quite keen to have the case begin and actually go ahead.
Any comment yet from Mr. Zuma's team?
Yes, the foundation spokesperson, Mr. Mzwanele Manyi, was also at court today, and he indicated that the former president is possibly going to appeal this. He said the foundation is going to encourage him to appeal. So that's likely to actually see another delay take place in this case if he does in fact appeal the matter. He felt that the proceeding, the ruling was unfair to the former president, even though Judge Pitt Kun's ruling is more than 100 pages long and actually contains quite a lot of detail as to, why he's come to that decision. And he referenced, other case law. So we'll have to see how that appeal unfolds in the next few weeks. But the Zuma team is definitely considering taking this decision on appeal.
Well, it looks like the case has been postponed for trial. And perhaps what are we likely to see next?
Well, as indicated by the court, the 11th of April is the next court date. Incidentally, one of the Zuma supporters actually pointed out that the 12th of April is going to be the former president's 80th birthday. So it will be quite interesting to see him actually appearing in court just a day before he turns 80. But his lawyers have also suggested that there would be an interlocutory application brought at some point, possibly just before the 11th of April, and that could be that appeal application that they want to bring. They would ordinarily have to first file for leave to appeal at the High Court before going to the Supreme Court of Appeal. And if the High Court grants leave to appeal, then they would be able to go to the High Court.
Well, Diane Hawker, many thanks.
To the Supreme Court of Appeal.
All right then, Diane, many thanks for unpacking this for us. Now let's go to East of Africa, where Sudan's top general Abdel Fattah al-Burhan says his country's High Judicial Council and Prosecution Council will operate once again. A constitutional court will be formed by the end of this month. Al-Burhan spoke during a press conference where he also said the military seized power on Monday to prevent a civil war. Now, his comments come after a coup just over 2 years into a delicate power-sharing arrangement between the military and civilians. He added that the deposed Prime Minister Abdullah Hamdok was being kept at the general's house for his own safety and would be allowed home soon.
الشهر احنا التزمنا بانه يقوم مجلس القضاء العالي، يقوم مجلس النيابه، تشكل المحكمه الدستوريه بواسطه القانون، ما في زول بيشكلها ولا في زول بيتدخل فيها كما ورد في قوانين هذه المؤسسه. نهايه الشهر احنا التزمنا بانه يقوم مجلس القضاء العالي، يقوم مجلس النيابه، تشكل المحكمه الدستوريه بواسطه القانون، ما في زول بيشكلها ولا في زول بيتدخل فيها كما ورد في قوانين.
In the meantime, at least 7 people have been killed and dozens injured owing to soldiers opening fire on protesters in Sudan. This comes as crowds of angry Sudanese citizens continued to protest Monday's military coup. In the days before the coup, Prime Minister Abdullah Hamdok warned of a dangerous crisis after one faction in the transitional government called for the military to take over. Earlier, we spoke to the head of Africa Peace and Security Governance Program Institute for Security Studies in Addis Ababa, Dr. Andrews Atta Asamoah, on the coup's impact in Sudan and on the continent.
I think it depends on which levers they pull at this time. I think what is clear is to get them to reverse the coup. And I think international actors have an opportunity to be able to do that because Sudan is at a very vulnerable point economically. And we've already seen that Washington is rolling back on some of the support. That kind of support will put a lot of pressure on the military regime to roll back what they've tried to do. I think that is important, but that cannot only happen and yield results if it's coming only from the West. It has to be something that has to be supported by Gulf states, but particularly Sudan's neighbors from Egypt and all those in the region. Those are going to be incredibly important. If all of these work in concert towards putting pressure, then it's going to be very difficult for the army to sustain themselves in power. Then they will be required to roll back. If not, it's going to be extremely difficult.
Now, staying in East Africa, Ethiopia's military has launched another airstrike in Tigray, hitting what a government official called a rebel training facility just outside the regional capital, Mekelle. Government spokeswoman Salawat Kassa said a special forces training center for the terrorist group TPLF was the target of today's airstrike. The latest airstrike was in Kuya, a town 5 kilometers east of Mekelle, which the TPLF recaptured from government forces in June and has held ever since. Now, the bombings in Tigray's northern and western parts have drawn international censure and disrupted UN access to the region, where an estimated 400,000 people face famine-like conditions under a de facto aid blockade. Now, still in the region, the United Nations has warned of